Well, thank you all for being here. It's a small space, but it's nice and cozy. We thought we'd switch on the lights because these are really bright spotlights. So this is going to be the Future of the Brain session. We're going to hope to tie what we understand, new ways of understanding the brain, exploring the brain, but also new ways of medicine for the brain. So let me give you the background to what I'm going to show you is the future of the brain. So 20 years ago, I came to Switzerland, and the Swiss federal government said that they were willing to back a project with about $400 million for 20 years to go find out a recipe, software recipe, to copy the brain digitally. The Swiss government actually cemented it in the federal budget together with bridges and tunnels because they knew, I think, that's my opinion, they knew that it was going to be controversial. People would say, you can't build the brain. We don't understand enough about the brain. We don't know all the parts of the brain. So they cemented it so that that budget could never go away. So of course this is the best grant a scientist can ever get. I'm a professor of neuroscience at the EPFL, and so that was the grant that I got 20 years ago. And the mission was to go find the recipe. How do you copy the brain digitally? So we completed this in December 2024, and we have the recipe, and it's actually 18 million lines of software code. This code reads all the literature about the brain. It's AI that reads all the literature about the brain. It goes and it finds data on the brain mapping data, neurons, densities of neurons, brain regions, atlases, molecules, proteins, and it gets this data and it maps it into a knowledge graph and then puts it into brain atlases, and then from there you have algorithms that turn them into actual functional models, computational models. So you can actually build a computational model of the brain. So this was completed, and we think that this will now begin in order to start. So this was done in a university. It's public money. So we decided together with the university, the EPFL, that we should open this and give it out to the world so that we can start what we call the age of digital brains. Because it's a recipe, it's not just one model of the brain, it's actually a recipe how to build the brain. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody in the world can use this recipe to build any brain. So the news for you is that you can build the brain. And there are ways to fill in the gaps that we don't know. We've solved how to take whatever information is available and infer almost all the rest to get an exquisitely detailed model of the brain. So let me just first tell you what are digital brains. So they really are highly detailed models of the brain. Every neuron, this is a mouse brain, but we've worked on rat brains, we've worked on other species, we've even worked on parts of the human brain, but this is a mouse brain. And it captures the distribution of every neuron, every type of neuron, the way they're shaped, the way that they look, the way that they behave electrically. So we have formulas that recreate their behavior. So every neuron behaves the way it does in real. And every synapse as well. So it recreates the connectivity between all the neurons. So we actually, I'll just show you in brief. You can simplify this as 5 steps. The first step is you have to fill the brain with neurons according to the densities that they are and the types. And each color here is a different type of neuron. So now you can go and you can fill this atlas with just little dots based on data, lots of algorithms that decide how many dots, what color the dot should be, and so on and so forth. And once you have that, we developed the rules how to grow all of these branches. It's like knowing how to grow pine trees. It's a computational model. It knows how to grow. And there are over 1,000 different branching structures. So we had to learn how to create them so that you have all these dendrites, which is where neurons receive information, and axons, which is where they project information. So we had to learn how to grow the dendrites of the neurons, and then we had to learn how to grow the axons. And what is remarkable is that your brain, if you had to unwrap all the cables, the axons in your brain, you could lasso the moon and back. So, you have an incredible brain. It's really got incredible amount of cabling. So we created the algorithms that can recreate the cabling that will connect all of the neurons into this huge graph. And then you take these and you put them together, and that is where the synapses are formed. And there's a lot of synapses. It's about 100 billion synapses in a mouse brain, and you have about 100 trillion synapses in a human brain. So what you get is a huge graph. It's actually a knowledge graph, where every neuron is a little supercomputer, and you've got 100 billion by 100 billion or graph. That is the computational unit. You are a knowledge graph. You're a massive Excel sheet with 100 billion rows and 100 billion columns, but each little cell in that Excel sheet is doing an incredible computation. And then what we do is we developed we had to study the electrical behavior and capture them in terms of the biophysics of the neurons, how to recreate the electrical behavior. So the colors changing here are the electrical behaviors of the different neurons. And when you do that, the neurons start communicating and they start creating this neural activity. Now we have a virtual brain, a virtual piece of tissue that you can use in tandem with a real piece of tissue. So we can test it the way we test it in a laboratory. We developed a lot of imaging, so we can also look at it the way that we look at a real brain under a microscope. We can now look under a virtual microscope at the virtual brain, and we can keep improving the model brain until they're almost indistinguishable. So you can think of it as making a kind of fax copy, a digital copy of the brain. Of course, it's not perfect. There would be still some things missing. You can improve it, but it is now set on a roadmap where it can just improve until you can have an exquisite copy of almost any species that you wish to tackle. You can do the human brain, but it will cost a lot of computing to do. So this way, now with this technology, yes?
Question, what would you say the accuracy of the representation is now for an example brain like what you just showed?
The accuracy is incredible. We can reproduce dozens and dozens of experiments that you can do on real brains, and we see the same results in the virtual brain. So it behaves the same way as we've seen in experiments, in many. We've published over 400 papers on this. So, but now, how do we give this away to the world so that you can do it tomorrow? You can get a lab and you can start building. We've done building. We've been building for 20 years. So we created an institute called the Open Brain Institute. And it's a foundation. We discussed with the EPFL what's the best way we can give this out to the world. All the data, petabytes of data that we've collected, software, the 18 million lines of code. And we created this Open Brain Institute. And in this institute, what we did is we created virtual laboratories. So you can go, right now, if you wanted to, you can go and open a virtual laboratory, and you can start building brains. Now, this laboratory gives you access to essentially almost everything that we know about the brain, because it's like a central aggregator where we can go and look at the literature. You can explore different neurons in the brain. You can decide to build one neuron. You can decide to build a group of them. You can decide to build a brain region. But even that was still difficult. So I just want to pause this video. What you see here is that we actually, to make this much easier for you, is that we gave all the code to AI. So now you don't even really need to know anything about neuroscience. You can have a nice discussion with the AI to help you build a brain, or to build a part of the brain, or a neuron. And if you are a scientist and you want to know more, you can say, well, show me the code, show me the equation, show me the algorithms, because it's all open. Everybody can download everything for free. So we're triggering this age of digital brains where you can build virtual copies of brains, and now you can start studying. You can change it. You can have a hypothesis for a disease like in autism. Maybe there's too many connections formed between certain types of neurons. You can actually build a brain with these modifications. You can ask the AI to build you this brain with these different modifications. And then you can simulate an autistic brain, or you can simulate different diseases. What I'm not showing you is that this also goes down to the molecular level. We've reconstructed the metabolic system. It's 16,000 different pathways between the metabolites and the transporters and the ion channels and the blood and the glia and the neuronal communication. So you can also do very detailed molecular studies, which are much more closer to exploring drug candidates or genetic candidates for diseases. And of course, you can also experiment how you would do virtual prosthetics. Where would you put the brain implant? Should it be in this part of the brain? Should you record this? Should you interact in this particular way? And so you can virtually prototype different brain implants. So this now allows you, and this is just a vision, you can then simulate the brain and you can do all these different experiments. We actually launched this last year at the World Economic Forum in January. And the labs opened in about May or April. So in 9 months, you already have about 500 labs from all around the world. But the beauty is that when you form a lab, let's say you form a lab, and you're let's say you're a cellular neuroscientist, or let's say you don't know anything about the brain. You form a lab. You can invite your colleagues. You can invite a neuroscientist that knows about genes, one knows about proteins, another one knows about receptors, another one that knows about the cognition, and you can invite them and say, come on, let's build the brain together. So in these virtual labs, you can now invite all your colleagues from anywhere in the world, and you can build brains together. So there's already 500 in the first 9 months of launching these labs. And we are hoping that this will really go across all of neuroscience. So it's already the biggest neuroscience institute in the world with 500 labs, but there's probably going to be in the range of 2,000 labs by the end of this year. And we're targeting about 10,000 labs, which we think every neuroscientist in the world should be doing experiments in tandem with simulation, because it improves the speed at which and the accuracy and the appropriateness in which you do experiments. We're also started with different universities. We're establishing these OBI centers. Actually, just a little joke. With the AI we call OB1, because we do think that we do think that it's time for the Jedi neuroscientist. We need to do neuroscience at the speed of thought. You should be able to speak to the AI, build things, change things, say, I want to analyze this. There's no reason why we cannot, in this age of AI, there's no reason why we cannot do neuroscience actually at the speed of thought. And that, we hope, is going to be a massive accelerator for us to understand the brain, to explore different diseases, to explore different treatments. So this is already launched, but we want to establish these OBI centers of excellence in different universities around the world. We're already starting looking at, in the Middle East, in China, in Australia, in the US, in Seattle, in different places. So with that, that's the first glimpse, but this is just the beginning, because Murali is going to tell you about the future of how we're going to actually develop medicines for the brain. Thank you, Murali.
What Henry said is so important. Throughout this whole conference, you've all heard about how energy hungry the big AI models are. In fact, as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, the prediction is 30% of the planet will be occupied only by data centers. The brain operates on 20 watts of power, smaller than one of these light bulbs. So the more we can mimic the brain in terms of synaptic processing, the more efficient we can build AI models. Of course, we're spending about $2.5 billion in 2026 on AI. That's going to approach the cost of neurological and mental disorders today. The biggest threat to the cognitive revolution to cognitive longevity are neurological and mental diseases. So I'm going to talk about one such disease, Alzheimer's, which is very closely tied to aging. And I believe if we crack the puzzle of Alzheimer's, we'll also understand a lot about how the human body ages, how the brain ages, and in many ways the brain is the gatekeeper of human longevity. So Alzheimer's was first described in 1906 by Dr. Alzheimer, who noticed some unusual pathology in a relatively young subject. We've gone from that point, 1906, to now where there's a case of dementia every 3 seconds. And around the world, there's something like 50 million cases of dementia. Alzheimer's is one type of dementia. It's the most common cause, and there are many types of dementia. And the projections are, as we get older, these numbers are going to double or triple. And why is that an issue? That's an issue because we were a relatively young population, let's say 30, 40 years ago. And we are now an aging society. And you can see here, between, say, 1950s or so, younger children outnumbered the number of older people. And you can see what happens progressively. Somewhere around 2024, the lines are starting to cross of the percent of the population that's over 65 and the percent of the population that's very young. And now this is the projection of how the older population is going to grow. So this is a significant concern, and this is an area that we really need to prioritize in terms of funding and open science. So I want to share with you some advances that have occurred. Now, Alzheimer's, I mentioned, is a disease of aging. And what this graph shows you is the prevalence of Alzheimer's and how it increases and almost doubles by every decade of life. And if I had broken this graph down by men and women, what you would see is that the increase appears to be sharper amongst women than men. We don't know why. Some people believe it's a detection bias caused by lower education levels in women who are growing up maybe in the 1930s, 1940s, and as women's education level and cognitive reserve increases, they will have equal sort of resilience to Alzheimer's as men do, and perhaps even as women's education levels exceeds that, so men, the lines will sort of diverge. We still don't understand why aging and Alzheimer's are so intimately linked. That is a crucial issue. What happens? Why does the brain become less resilient that allows pathology to build up? Does the brain even have a fixed lifespan? If we can eliminate this, will the brain keep functioning for 200 years or 500 years? So that's the question that I think solving Alzheimer's will allow us to address. Okay, so what happens in Alzheimer's? You can see Alzheimer's disease is called a neurodegenerative disease. A neurodegenerative disease means there is degeneration of the cortical gray matter. There's loss of synaptic connections. I think Henry mentioned there's something like trillions of synapses. These connections start getting weakened and eventually start getting destroyed. And now we have very sophisticated imaging techniques that can be combined with AI to not only quantify the degree of volume loss in different regions of the brain, but you can actually compute what's called as a brain age gap. What is the gap between your chronological age and what your current brain age is? So the younger, of course, your brain age is relative to your chronological age, the lower the risk for you developing Alzheimer's.
When you find correlations, you can find patterns in these correlations, and when you find patterns, you can build applications. And that is the revolution you're seeing here today. In all of Davos, in almost everywhere, it is about building infrastructure, getting energy, getting compute, making token factories, which is to tokenize all of humans' knowledge, and then learn the correlations. In a way, it's also an observer AI, because it's looking at the data. It's like looking at the past, at all the data. And it learns patterns. But this is almost 180 degrees opposite to how the brain works. The brain does not learn correlations. If we had to learn correlations, you would never have evolved any animal species. Because the number of correlations is so vast that you would be paralyzed just looking at all these correlations and deciding which one is statistically better than the next one and which action you should take next. But also when you look at the architecture of the brain, this is the one thing that you learn as a neuroscientist, that it actually turns out that there is no way that the brain works. The brain is a real-time machine. A giraffe, when it's born, in the first 30 seconds or 60 seconds, is standing up. In the next minute, it's walking next to its mum. In the next minute, within 3 minutes, it's running in the field. There's no historical data. So the brain does not need historical data. It's got causal learning. It understands the causality of the world, and it can act in real time. And it learns continuously. It never has to power down. Let me collect some data, and now I reboot myself and I go forward. The brain doesn't do that. The brain is learning all the time. You're learning every millisecond. You're learning all the time. So it's continuous learning that doesn't need any historical data. And that is what we call the causal AI paradigm, because the brain learns cause and effect. And the reason why the brain is so efficient, as Murali pointed out, is because causal relationships are a tiny subset of all the correlations out there. So you only have to learn this. You don't have to learn all of that. And if you can solve learning this, you actually can generate the behaviors in real time. And so you can think of what the brain does as being a prospective AI. It's looking forward at experiences, and it's learning constantly. It's learning cause and effect, and it's actually the most profound sort of philosophical thing is that it's not an observer. You may think that you're observing, but you're not observing. These pictures are not coming into your eyes. The only thing that comes into your eyes is little wavelengths and amplitudes. And that's all. And they're fragmented all over the brain. And the brain constructs these images. You're a participant. You're not an observer. We're inside the world. We're not outside the world looking at the world. And that embodiment, in neuroscience we call it embodiment, that embodiment has been a major, major challenge in neuroscience. How do you solve embodiment? But if you understand cause and effect, or you get cause and effect learning, you get embodiment. So just to give you an idea, we solved this after 7 years, and you can now have an AI that does not need any data, and it can learn in real time, and it learns super fast. So this is a game. It's a mini cognitive test that is used in benchmarks for robotics. So this is game one. The first time this brain, and it's only a small digital brain, actually only 500 neurons. You don't actually even need more. But the very first game it tries to play, let me go back, it is already trying to react to the ball, but it can't hit the ball. In the second game, it learns how to hit the ball. So there it manages to hit the ball, but it doesn't know how to score a goal. In the next game, it learns how to score, but it hasn't understood the weaknesses of its opponent. This is a cognitive task because it's got to forecast, it's got to judge what the opponent is doing. Is it moving fast? Is it moving down? Is it going to do a quick movement? And it hasn't yet mastered that. But by game 11, it's mastered the opponent. It understands the weakness of the opponent, and it will not let the opponent even score one goal. Now, to give you a contrast to that, DeepMind, based on correlations, deep reinforcement learning is fundamentally, they use deep reinforcement learning and they use surrogate data synthesis, and they published a paper in Nature where they need hundreds of examples of the past, and for each example, they synthesize more examples, so surrogate data. So the problem is that when you get to real time, you've got no more data. So they have to synthesize the data at the real-time barrier. And so they actually still need tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of examples of the past in order to play this game. And they have the world record, and they call their model Dreamer, because it has to dream up data at the real-time barrier. What they have not done is change the paradigm. which is what we have done. And if you do that, you get causal modeling. Now, the power of causal modeling is that you can start tackling diseases, because the body, the genes, the protein networks, they're all causal networks. And so this is the kind of AI you're going to need if you want to tackle, understand diseases, if you want to get towards a digital twin. But let me just give you another example, just to get a feeling of this giraffe standing up and running in the savannah. So this is just some data that's streaming into this thing. It's the first time it's ever seen this data. It's born. Here it's born. The little digital brain is trying to sync. These are different dimensions of data. We've tested this with hundreds. You can simultaneously send hundreds of different data streams into these few neurons. And each one it's trying to sync up with, and then it locks in. It locks into the data. It has embodied in the data. It's become the data. So that's why we call our products I am, because I become. I become the data. And this is the mini tiny version of what Murali is talking about when he says a digital twin of a patient, is that you would stream in the data of the patient, and eventually, in the beginning, the brain model will be trying to sync up with all the data of the patient, and then it locks in, and then it becomes the patient. Then it will be I am patient. So the applications are huge, and we have for industrial applications, but this is more in the context of medicine. So one of the things that we'll do is to feed in these dynamics of molecular pathways, where it can sync up with the molecular systems, and basically what it's doing is building a causal model of the molecular network. And once you have a causal model, you actually can understand what is causing. You can trace the chain of causality, and you can start understanding what's causing diseases or what's causing perturbations, not what's correlated to it. And in this example, we were exploring with the medical company that does cognitive tests. They take patients and they do psychophysical tests and cognitive tests, and you can let the brain actually feed in the same data until it starts to act like the patient with the deficit. And then you can explore what would you need to change causally to actually fix the patient. And so that could become an advisor for cognitive therapists to say, look, this is where you should focus on, because that would be the quickest way to actually rehabilitate that patient. And then, of course, you can do neuroprosthetics. You can imagine if you implanted this into the brain, it would become a part of the rest of the brain and start working in synchrony with the rest of the brain. So that's the vision of digital twins for medicine in the future. It's not all there yet for medicine. We're actually beginning much more in industrial applications, but this is definitely an area that will mature over the next years, and we look forward to telling you more about it next year in Davos at the Science House. Thank you. A lot of this almost all the Allen Institute data is in the OBI. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you do, if you want to understand or you want to come around, if you want to build a model of a diseased brain, the best is to take the data. So this is really data-driven models. So for example, we did recreate here, this is the vasculature with the glia. You can reconstruct the metabolic system of the brain by taking transcriptomic data from an aged animal and aged human and young. And then you can reconstruct the metabolic network of both, and you can start seeing what's different. And actually there's a paper published in Frontiers, if you're interested, where we show the metabolic aging of the brain. It explores what is going wrong metabolically, which is your power supply, right? If your power supply goes wrong, a lot of the things that Murali showed, they go wrong. So this is one area where you can. So absolutely, the more data you have, this is data-driven. We're not hypothesizing. We're trying to take the data, build the model, and see what's different.
So you will have a ALS brain on some, because
Right.
we're working with Allen Brain Institute
Yes.
to simulate the
Exactly.
ALS brain right now. So
You'll have computational causal models for different diseases. And the more data you can get, the more representative these models will be.
that's why I wanted to know.
And the more you can personalize it, eventually you can do head-to-head comparison trials of therapies, you can do predictions,
Exactly.
you know.
Absolutely, you can use a lot of the Allen Institute data is in here, and you can also call it if it's not. So through the virtual lab, you build the connection with the data, you call it in. The Allen Institute has done a lot, but you know, when we started this, most of the neuroscientists said, no, we still need to map. So the world's been mapping while we've been building. Now we have tools to build. So that's what we want to give away so everybody can start building and benefiting from all the maps.
So hopefully next Davos you will have different disease brains.
Well, it's up to now
the
it's look,
clinicians
you know, we solved the academic challenge of how do you build a brain when you only have a little bit of information. That is the real big problem we solved, right? Because we haven't mapped the whole brain.
Yeah.
But so what we solved is the academic challenge, and we built all the software. Now it's no longer an academic project. So what we're doing is giving it away to the world, and it's up to you to come and build a brain of different diseases. So we want to hear you talk about it. Excellent.